If you're trying to predict the future, our Brian Kelly is peering into his crystal ball and watching one possibly leading indicator. Beeks, what are you following? What are you seeing?
Yeah, Dom, predictions are hard, especially when they're about the future. So let me take a stab at it, though. So, my world that I look at every day is Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And so when I look at that, and as Bitcoin gets more institutionalized, it is starting to get more correlated with the traditional markets. So look at, this is, Bitcoin versus the NASDAQ. The 30-day rolling correlation of Bitcoin and the NASDAQ index is about 47%. That's the highest correlation we have seen since September, when the NASDAQ and Bitcoin bottomed. And then finally, you look at these, and they're basically trading in lockstep. So let's take a look at the chart here, right? We have Bitcoin versus the NASDAQ. You can see they trade in lockstep, except for, notice, Bitcoin tends to lead the NASDAQ. Usually about 5 to 10 days or so, Bitcoin trading tends to lead. What do we have over the weekend? We had Bitcoin break out from a relatively short-term range. So I'm looking at this and saying, okay, as more institutions come in, they're using it as a pro-cyclical risk-on inflation hedge. If that's the same thing that the NASDAQ is getting and Bitcoin starting to tick up, then it's reasonable to assume that as long as this correlation holds, that maybe the NASDAQ has bottomed here. And as we look into Q1 of 2022, we're going to get a bottom in both Bitcoin and the NASDAQ, and they may trade higher together.
All right, so an interesting point there as we're looking at the charts. Tim Seymour, I wonder, you've spoken in the past about this. You've noticed this kind of similar trend here. Over the course of the last several months, we've referred to Bitcoin as both a safe haven trade and a risk asset as well. So what's the predominant theme or driving force behind the cryptocurrency trade now? Is it the safe haven, or is it that kind of risk on, as BK puts it, trade that you put on because you think things are going to go higher across the board?
Well, it's a safe haven within its own asset class, clearly, and yet it's a proxy play for risk and liquidity on some level, and why I agree with BK that if you look at those charts, even look at the September pullback in the triple Qs, it was a case where I make the argument that Bitcoin led that. And there's different reasons. BK pointed out the institutional adoption. I do think that in general, we are assessing some of Bitcoin's moves over the last couple of years is not just the secular trend that I think continues that BK's talked about and was on very early. I think it's also a function of Federal Reserve and central bank liquidity and fear of that and fear of fiat currencies. I think the dynamic in terms of the technical side of this trade is also that a ton of money's been made in crypto land, and a ton of money has been made by holders of Bitcoin. And at times when we've seen more volatility and a broader risk off, there's an argument that also investors in Bitcoin have been using the top 5 or 6 mega cap tech stocks as almost their money markets, their treasury stock, a place to park capital, a place to go actually at times be more defensive. But at times when markets are running, we've also seen them hit that same group of stocks.
It's so crazy. Steve, I mean, I've spoken to a number of who I would characterize as traditional stock traders and investors, and the conversation from them has turned all kinds of ways towards crypto. But to Tim's point, if there are folks out there who are traditional equity investors who are looking at then crypto, and then crypto investors looking towards things like the NASDAQ as a money market fund, is this a market that we can actually trust or is fundamentally oriented in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, first of all, let me start off with I agree with BK's analysis, and I like the fact that it's risk on and safe haven, right? So that's something that you want in one of your holdings. But Dom, I make it really easy. Next year, are we going to see more Bitcoin purchases or less? The answer is more. Are we going to see more acceptance by institutions to get into Bitcoin and alt currencies? I think it's going to be more without question. That means to me that whether you want to pick safe haven or risk asset, it means higher prices in Bitcoin. And ultimately, if BK's right, which I think he is, maybe we have seen the bottom in the NASDAQ as well.